Hey, this is Alan Stein, Leadership Performance Coach, and you are listening to Success is a Choice with Jamy Bechler.
Providing insights to help you grow your business, improve yourself, and add value to those around you. You're listening to the Success is a Choice podcast, where you get a peek into the lives of industry leaders as they share their stories with you.
Welcome to Success is a Choice podcast. I'm your host, Jamy Bechler, and today we're very honored to have Anton Goff as our guest. Anton is the athletic director at St. John's University, who has a long history of success in the Big East Conference. Before coming to St. John's University, he was also the athletic director at Hartford University and Bowie State University. Anton, welcome to Success is a Choice podcast.
James, thank you. Thanks for having me, man. Long time no talk to you, man. Good to be here.
You know, you've had a long career in athletics. You've played a lot of roles, had a lot of responsibility, been at a lot of different types of schools all across the country, and now you end up at St. John's. Tell us a little bit about your background. Tell us how you got to this point, what your journey's been like.
Well, first of all, it's been long, man. I can't believe I've been in this business now 20 years. Started back, kind of with you at Kent State University, where I was graduate assistant, then moved into being academic advisor and partly like a director of basketball and football operations and doing some of the internal works as far as Kent State was there. And then left there and went to University of Maryland, where I worked with Gary Williams and was in charge of all the student services for our men's basketball team there, and stayed there for a while, and then left there and went to Michigan State, where I was kind of in the same role but for football. Then came back to University of Maryland as the senior associate athletic director. I was in charge of all the internal things for our 27 sports, and then 2010 got my first athletic director's position, Division II, Bowie State University in Maryland, which was literally right down the street from University of Maryland, and so I didn't have to move, so that was a good transition for me and the family. And then took the University of Hartford job, and then recently, a year ago, named the AD at St. John's University, and excited about what we're doing here. You know, like we said in the intro, a variety of different positions you've held and schools you've been at. How has that helped? You know, you've been at big-time schools, and then you were also at smaller schools as athletic directors, smaller schools than St. John's. How have all of those experiences helped prepare you for this? Because St. John's is in the Big East, it's a big-time school. It's in the Big Apple. You know, there's everything about St. John's kind of screams big. Yeah, I think, every single stop that I've been at has been unique, but, they're all the same. They've all been in athletic departments. They've all been highly prized positions where there's a lot of responsibility delved in them. So, a lot of people ask me about, what's it like, being in New York. Was I intimidating coming to New York? It's the, number one media capital of our country. And I was like, well, I had a lot of practice at Maryland, being in like the number 3 or number 4 community as far as media attention, and so I think that prepared me for being here. I've worked with Hall of Fame coaches and Coach Izzo and Gary Williams, and so that allowed me to transition here to work with Chris Mullin. So, I think all those things that I experienced, having, been with, schools with huge resources as well as schools with not so huge resources has given me a sense of, fiscal responsibility that I want to make sure that I'm a good stewardship of our finances. And so I think all those things that I've been through the last 20 years have really prepared me to step in this role and make a smooth transition.
Now, as an athletic director, obviously every sport is important and every student athlete's important, but there's some sports that are have more exposure. Football, men's basketball typically are the ones that get the ESPN coverage and that kind of stuff. And so dealing with a basketball coach or a football coach is sometimes like dealing with a star player, or for a business person dealing with some star employee, a star salesman. How do you deal with those star coaches? And in your instance, you mentioned earlier Chris Mullins. Chris Mullins is a legend in New York, a legend from St. John's, Hall of Famer, Dream Teamer. So you have a little added there with him, added dynamic. But how do you deal as a leader? How do you deal with those star employees that you have, or those people that maybe have quite a platform?
I think for me personally and as an athletic director, one of the things I've always tried to do as far as, on paper, the boss of a coach or I'm a coach's supervisor, I've always tried to make it a partnership. And that was no different here when I came here. When I sat down with Chris in the initial process, I told him, I was like, I'm not coming down here to be your boss. I'm coming here to be your partner. I'm coming here to help you be successful. And when you have a legend like Chris Mellon, I mean, he's a two-time Hall of Famer. He's in the Hall of Fame for his playing career, and he's in the Hall of Fame for being on the original Dream Team. You've got to be able to communicate with him on a level that he understands. And I've always been a straightforward shooter. Having dealt with a Gary Williams, I think, has prepared me. He's another Hall of Famer. Although at Michigan State I was with football, I had a lot of dealings with Coach Izzo. Obviously, he's going to be a Hall of Famer. And so, I've always looked at it as whatever my position is, I want to support the coach. I want to put him in a position where he has the resources to be successful. And I think when you come from that angle, as opposed to, hey, I'm the boss, because these guys have bigger images than me, they make more money than me, and so sometimes the relationship is inversed. And so, I've always looked at it as, what can I do to be a partner with these guys and our coaches? And you know what? Tell you the truth, I have that same philosophy with my women's soccer coach. And so it's not out of realm where I treat, my revenue producing coach much different than my non-revenue producing coach. I try to treat everybody, as partners and give them the resources that I'm able to put them in a successful position.
Great insight. Speaking of legends, your mother has quite the reputation. She's a legend in the athletics realm, a former Division I conference commissioner. She's won countless and countless awards in athletics through the years. How has having your mother that's so well known in athletics, how has that helped prepare you for your current roles?
Well, my mother is a female pioneer, and when I was young, I didn't appreciate it as much as I do now. I always thought it was a hindrance because I always was under the impression that I could never live up to my mom's, legacy and this and that. And so maybe I shouldn't go into athletics, and so, when I was young, I thought about that. But, I tell people all the time I wasn't born to be an AD, but I was raised to be one. I mean, my entire life I've been around college athletics. And so having her insight, having her as a mentor, as a role model has been absolutely incredible for me. Like, I can pick up the phone anytime, call my mom, and 99.9% of any scenario that I've experienced, she's already experienced and dealt with it, and so I can bounce things off of her, and I've been able to do that my entire career. And, it's funny, like, when I started out in this business, I was known as Alfreda's son, and now my mom tells me, like, now places she goes, she's now Anton's mom. And so it's kind of funny that the roles have kind of reversed as I've moved up in my career and gotten a little more well-known in this business.
That's great. You have a free consultant on the other end of the line whenever you want, because I know she does consulting for athletic departments.
Yep.
So
no doubt.
It's nice to have that. Looking back on your career, what are some of the things that stand out to you that you're kind of most proud of?
I think first and foremost, being able to be the athletic director at St. John's. I mean, growing up for me, in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, the Big East was such a huge part of our life. And, St. John's was always iconic. And now to be sitting in a seat in New York City as the AD, to me is just incredible, something I never really fathomed. And so that to me is a huge accomplishment. But I think mostly it's the student athletes that I feel like I've made a positive impact and touch. Like, I still stay in touch with so many student athletes, and that's why I got in this business. Like, I love college athletics and I love helping people. And so for me, there was no better role than to do was to be an athletic director where I could stay around college sports, but then I ultimately the reason I got in this was to help young people. And so, like, we were at Kent State together, Jamie. I still talk to a lot of those guys at Kent State. I still have guys at Michigan State, Maryland, Bowie State, Hartford, that I still stay in touch with. And to me, that tells me I did something right by those young gentlemen and females. And so, for me, that's the biggest accomplishment in my life, I feel like, is that I've been able to, I think, help some people.
And you mentioned Kent State, and I saw you on a daily basis, and I saw what you did, back there when you were a GA or a so-called entry level, or a guy that just working with one sport. And I saw how you invested in the lives of student athletes. So there's no doubt in my mind back then that you were going to be successful, and there's no question, why you're at a level that you're at right now, because you were doing it at an early age and you kept it up. Obviously, though, you've been successful, but you haven't. It probably hasn't always been smooth sailing. You've probably had some obstacles or some challenges that you've faced. Describe one or two of those challenges and maybe how you have overcome those to keep persevering on to be successful.
Well, I think one of the challenges that when, most athletic directors come from a background of fundraising. Well, I started out on the kind of internal side. And so, for me, it's been a challenge to get to the AD chair coming from where I came from. And so if you look at the background of most athletic directors, not too many came up and they were, academic guys for men's basketball or things of that nature. And so that's been a constant, battle for me to try to make sure that I had what people perceive as the skills to sit in a seat. And so, trying to break out of that role of, hey, that's the academic guy, as more of, hey, that's a guy that could be a potential athletic director. So that's been a big challenge to me. And what I did is I just tried, first and foremost, as the academic guy or the internal guy, to try to be the best I could possibly be. So I was viewed as a valuable resource. And once I got to that level, then I started voicing to my supervisors about how I wanted to be an athletic director and the tools that I felt like I needed to get in my toolbox. And I was luckily, heard and had some great bosses that allowed me to do some things outside of what a normal academic person does or a normal internal person does to get on that external side, and allowed me to be looked at as somebody who could be an athletic director. And then once I sat in the seat, just took off from there. I think that was the biggest challenge for me in this profession.
You see a lot of leaders in your current job, and you see a lot of leaders be successful and fail all at the same time. Have you seen some common traits or some mistakes that people make time and time again, or you see leaders making these mistakes that kind of derail their careers or at least kind of shoot themselves in the foot and make things more difficult for themselves?
Yeah, I would say that the most common thread that I see is when leaders make it about themselves and not the organization. I think when they came out with the term servant leader, I think that summed it up to what most successful leaders are. Now, you have to have a little bit of confidence or vision or those type of things about yourself to get into those leadership positions. But I think ultimately to be successful, you have to look at it as, you're serving this organization. I think sometimes some leaders, once they get to a leadership position, they think they're the smartest guy in the room, or they want to be the smartest person in the room. And for me, that's opposite. I don't want to be the smart. I want people around me that are more talented, more intelligent, that have a diverse amount of ideas, and we can make decisions together, as opposed to, if I'm the smartest person in the room, then we're in trouble. I always tell my team. So, I think, that sometimes leaders get caught up, you work so hard to get into a certain position, and once you get there, you think, well, now I know it all. And so I think that's one of the common denominators of failure. Yeah, for me, I always when I look at different people that I'm bringing into the organization to work with me, I know I'm a big picture guy. I'm pretty good at seeing a big picture. I'm a dreamer, but I need somebody who is a detail-oriented person, almost anal retentive, because if I have a bunch of people in the room with me, we're dreaming big, we're going to miss out on the details. And that's where you can get tripped up. And so if I have somebody who is really always looking at the details, crossing the T's, dotting the I's, then we're a good team.
And that's just, I mean, it's the same way when you're building an actual basketball team or a football team. You bring in players that have different strengths. You know, in basketball, you don't want to have 5 shooters on the floor, but throwing passes or screens.
Exactly.
That's going to be tough.
No doubt.
We'll return to Anton shortly, but I wanted to take a moment to mention our latest book, The Leadership Playbook. You know, Frederick Douglass once said that it is easier to build strong children than it is to repair broken men. Well, we have put together a book that helps student athletes learn how to be better leaders and positive teammates. When we help develop today's students, we also help influence the future. Visit theleadershipplaybook.com to learn more about this impactful book. And now back to more insights from Anton Goff.
Looking back on your career, what would you have done differently?
You know what? I think the one thing that I would have done differently is probably the educational piece. I think for as career-wise, like, you know, every move I made led me to this. And so I think I did the right moves and when I made those moves. But if I could go back and do one thing, when we were at Kent State, I was close to starting my dissertation for my PhD. I had just finished my written and oral comprehensive tests, and right before I started writing, I got a call from Maryland and kind of like left that behind. And so I wish I would have just, you know, finished my PhD. You know, the sound of Dr. Goff would have been pretty cool. But I mean, I think I ended up okay. I was one of the reasons I was doing it. I was thinking at some point I wanted to be a president of a university, but now that I'm close to that level, I know I don't want to be a president. So, you know, maybe one day I'll you know, finish it. Maybe I won't, not sure. But, you know, that's the one thing that sometimes I think about, like, man, I wish I would have just kept writing.
Well, maybe one of these days you'll get an honorary doctorate. You know,
maybe.
You'll speak at a commencement and they'll hand you that honorary diploma, and then you can have people start calling you a doctor.
There you go.
What do you do on a daily basis or on a regular basis that kind of ensures that you continue to grow and develop as a leader?
I think for me is just communicating with people on my team, with people outside of my team. You know, in this role, there's not a typical day, which is why I love the position, because one day I could be in the office most of the day, another day I could be out of town, another day I could be in the city meeting with alums or donors. But, you know, for me, I try to be a sponge. Like, I believe that I can learn from everybody, whether it's a GA in our communications department or a CEO in Manhattan. Like, I try to learn from everybody. And so, like, for me, being a sponge, listening to people, learning things, like, for me, that's what keeps me sharp, and that's what keeps me trying to get better.
How has being at St. John's in the year that you've been there, how has that been different than, let's say, when you were at Hartford, which is still a Division I, but not in New York, not in the media capital of the world, essentially?
Well, I think a lot more people know my name. The media scrutiny, the social media scrutiny is a lot higher. I mean, you know, when we win a game, I'm like the greatest athletic director ever. When we lose a game, people want to fire me. It's hilarious. And I tell people all the time, they're like, how do you deal with that, with so many people like knowing you and coming after you for things that you really can't control? And I tell people all the time, like, I'm not as good as they say I am, but I'm definitely not as bad as I say that they say I am. So, you know, I kind of, you know, that's been different. Like, you know, everything we do, we're in every day in the New York media for something, even if it's, hey, our coaches went and saw a recruit. Like, every day we're in the New York media. So that's a lot different than Hartford, and, you know, it's been an adjustment. But like I said, I think the training that I got at University of Maryland, being in that huge media market, has done me well, and so I can handle it.
You probably have a lot more trolls on social media.
Absolutely. It is absolutely crazy. I'm talking about the minute a game is over, it's either a whole bunch of praise or a whole bunch of hate. And it is what it is.
Speaking of growing and developing as a leader, are there any books or podcasts that you tend to consume or use that you would recommend?
Well, for me, there's a book by a guy named Jamy Bechler called The Leadership Playbook. that I would highly recommend out there. But
you're not getting paid for this appearance. You're not getting paid to mention that.
I hear you. You're my guy. I'm gonna plug you. I try to read. I'm not a huge consumer of reading, so like what catches me are like small books. So those leadership books by Maxwell and those type of things. But one book that I always go back to is called The First 90 Days by Michael Watkins, and I've been an AD now 3 different times, and every time I've taken a new position, I've kind of reread that book or re-reviewed it because, obviously your first 90 days are super important. So for me, that's always a book to come back to. And, as a leader, it's always somebody else's first 90 days. As your organization evolves, you're always hiring new people. And so I'm always referring back to that book. And then I just was given a book by one of my assistant baseball coaches, and I haven't read it yet, but it's interesting. I want to read it. It's called Extreme Ownership: How U.S. Navy SEALs Lead and Win. It's by Jocko Willink and Leif Babin, and so that's a book that's on my next list at some point when I get a chance to sit down and read, maybe on one of our road trips once basketball season starts.
Who would you like to meet or spend time with that you have not ever done?
I would love to sit down for 1 hour with President Barack Obama and just pick his brain on just what was it like to sit in that seat. I mean, to me, that's the ultimate seat. And so I would love to spend some time with him and just hear some stories and learn how he dealt with that pressure. I mean, I don't think there's, any more pressure than being the President of the United States.
What is a favorite quote or mantra that you have?
I have 2. One is embrace excellence in everything you do every day. And that's kind of like, to me, how I try to live my life. Like, whatever I'm doing, I want to be the best at it and try to motivate people around me to be the best they can be. And then the other one is a quote, if you're not getting better, you're getting worse. There's no staying the same. And that was from Mo Ankney, my college football coach at Bowling Green State University. And he used to ask us all the time, like we'd come off the field and he'd pick a couple people out and he'd say, hey, Goff, did you get better or worse today? Because there's no staying the same. And like, you've just practiced 2.5, 3 hours. You're like, hey, coach, I got better. And he'd be like, hey, man, the eye in the sky don't lie. Like, if you got better or not, and like, I didn't understand it then. I was like, as a freshman, I was 17 years old, just young, just trying to find my way. And as I got older, I understood, like, every day, if you evaluate yourself, you either got better or you got worse. And if you got better, like, what did you do to get better that day? And let's try to continue that momentum. If you got worse, be honest with yourself, like, hey, I didn't have a good day today. I didn't get better, and why was that, and what can I do the next day to get better? And so, I kind of looked at that as, my kind of life mantra, and, as being an athletic director, being a husband, being a father, being a good citizen. And so, that's kind of like how I kind of live.
Is there a productivity tool or app or resource or software you could do, you would have a hard time doing without?
For me, it's this software called WinAD. And what WinAD does is this company, Winthrop Intelligence, they kind of go out and they survey all the schools and get, like, through a Public Information Act, all the contracts, all of their, for employees, what the salaries are, as far as guaranteed gains, what are people paying guaranteed gains, what are the apparel contracts, what are the pouring rights. That, to me, has been such a great database of information for when I'm making decisions or negotiating contracts with either individuals or organizations, because now I know what the marketplace is, and so I can kind of place where we sit in that marketplace, and gives me a little more leverage when I have that information of, well, you're giving this Big East school a certain amount, we should get that, or we should get more, or we deserve less, however the organization is and how the negotiations go. So that's been helpful for me, especially to you're negotiating with a coach comes in, he wants a certain amount of money, and if you know what the going rate is for that same position at your level, it makes the negotiations a little bit easier.
If you could be on any reality show, what reality show would you want to be on or be best at?
You know what? I don't even watch reality shows, so I don't even know what's out there. I would make my own up, like, a Dana Life in NYC or something, and, have them follow me around and see the different people, like the diverse people that I meet in the city. Like, it is absolutely incredible. Like, the number of alums and the number of what we call subway alums, those who maybe didn't go to St. John's but grew up watching St. John's and is just have a high affinity for St. John's. It's incredible. I mean, I'm talking billionaires to guys that are doormen. Like, I could walk down the street sometimes, and if I have a St. John's hat or a shirt on, like, guys will stop me and tell me stories about where they were when a certain St. John's basketball game happened, or in the Garden, and, you know, this happened, or, you know, they've met one of our former players. It's just amazing.
Well, it sounds like you need to get with your communications staff or your sports information staff and make that happen. That sounds like a good possibility there.
Yeah, it would be interesting. It would be definitely interesting.
Well, other than your current job, do you have what would you want to do if you weren't being an athletic director, let's say, at the level that you're at?
If I could just pick and do something else, if they said, hey, you can no longer be an athletic director, but you could do something else, I would be a general manager of an NFL team.
Is there a particular football team that you would want?
Either Pittsburgh Steelers, where I grew up, or Dallas Cowboys, just because it's such an iconic franchise. Be stressful, but I think I'd enjoy it.
Well, you're used to stress, though. I mean, that's just daily. I mean, that's just like
yeah. It's funny. Like, so just this morning, like, I was in the elevator as I was getting ready to come to work, and an elderly gentleman came in. He was like, "Man, yesterday was just one of those days." I was like, "Hey, you have those days." He was like, "Man, you look so calm, cool, and collected." And I was like, I told him thank you, but in my mind I was like, dude, if you only knew how much stress I got to go through every day. And so it's just funny, man.
Well, you're essentially, I mean, you are an athletic director at a Division I school, but you're essentially a fireman. You know, you're putting out fires every single day, all day long.
Yep.
Well, man, Anton, I appreciate your time, taking a little bit of time out of your busy day to be with us and provide some insights. Appreciate that. Where can people connect with you or find out more about you or St. John's?
Yeah, so our website, redstormsports.com. We have all our info there. My social media is my Twitter, AD_Goff_St. John's. You know, and like, we have all our information out there. Anybody who wants to know what we're doing, we're actually the Big East is actually putting out the Big East schedule today at noon, so that's an exciting day for us right now. We're getting ready for that release and excited about the games we're going to play this year. Looking to improve and try to get into this tournament. That's why I'm here, and get us to the big dance.
Excellent. We'll make sure to put all that contact information and websites and the other things that you mentioned, the other books and productivity tools that you mentioned. We'll put those in the show notes so people can check those out at their leisure. So, Anton, I appreciate it. Thanks a lot for your time.
Thank you, Jamy. And congrats, man, on all the good things you're doing, man. I'm proud of you. Take care.
That was a fun conversation chatting with Anton Goff. If anyone can get the job done in the Big Apple, it is definitely Anton. He has the experience, charisma, and network to help St. John's continue their winning ways. If you enjoyed this episode today, please help others find it by giving it a 5-star review on iTunes. Thanks again for listening, and until next time, remember that success is a choice. What choice will you make today?